Well, here we go again. It is episode number 2 of the restart. Or maybe is this the official big drop? Or what are we calling this?
We're calling this the soft relaunch. Do you know what a soft launch is? Have you heard that? It's a new upcoming. Oh, you have?
Of course, yeah.
What does it mean?
You're not really ready to roll things out full production mode, but you kind of want to get the word out there.
You want to get people interested and involved. Yep. So this is
free for all after party podcast. Mike Ducey, Sam Gannon. We host Free for All every night at 10:30ish on Fox 4, and we're doing the pod now to talk about sportsy things and maybe some other things too.
Yeah, I mean, I think episode 1 was received well from what I heard from people. Did you hear from
your
anyone?
Mom liked it. That's what counts.
She enjoyed it. She said it went by very fast, so apparently we're not boring. To me, when people say, "Oh, that episode went by fast," it means it was a little bit entertaining. So
I think that's a good sign. So since we last talked, oh God, I got a pen open that could ruin my white shirt here if I'm not
Mike's
careful.
decked out with his tie and nice shirt.
Since we last talked on the pod anyway, you went to Cleveland for the Cowboys game.
Went to
First
Cleveland.
time in Cleveland?
Never had been to Cleveland. Never had been to Cleveland. Are you going to ask me what my impressions were of the city, the big city?
What'd you think?
No, it was cool. I mean, it's these trips to give people an idea because we get to fly on the charter with the Cowboys, which is very, very cool. I don't want to say that it's not. But we don't have a ton of time, obviously, to explore the city. Generally, we have a small window on Saturday night. So I did take one of the recommendations from one of our editor pals, Glenn, on where to go for food. We went to this place called Mabel's Barbecue, which was a very solid option. And enjoyed that. I'm not a huge BBQ
So
gal.
you live in Texas, but you're getting barbecue in Ohio. Okay.
That's what Glenn told me to do. Yeah, so we did that. It was very tasty. And the city itself was okay. I think one thing I'll say is when you visit other, cities around the country, it reminds you of just how much Dallas has at its disposal. You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
But the weather was great, perfect fall football weather. The crowd at the stadium was good. There was tons of Cowboys fans there. As you could imagine, they tend to travel well, especially for the season opener.
Only times I've been to Cleveland have been to fly into there to go to Canton, to the Hall of Fame. Cleveland is one of only 2 NFL cities where I've never covered a game, Cleveland and Nashville, Tennessee. So that's kind of that whole story there. But anyway, the Cowboys opened impressively. I picked Cleveland to win. Jeff picked Cleveland to win. You picked Dallas. Poppy, the station dog, picked Dallas. So you guys have that in common. I mean, the Dak deal got done. First, let's talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was such a weird day. We were waiting for this deal to get done. What's Jerry going to do to make a splash? Well, what he did to make a splash was leak it right before all of the network pregame shows were starting, right? So that consumed all of them.
The
Genius,
ultimate
really.
businessman
Yeah.
And way to get people talking week 1. It certainly dominated the headlines. Jerry's usually one to, he talks to reporters usually during game days. It tends to be afterwards, but because this news broke about Dak's new deal getting done, which is something we have talked about at nauseum for the last however many weeks. Mm-hmm. So we were all waiting in the bowels of the stadium.
So to speak.
Yes, waiting for Jerry to walk through so we could essentially ambush him about, why'd you get this done? Why now? So we waited for about, I would say 45 minutes once we got there at around 1:45 or 2 o'clock, so to speak. So it was a newsworthy day. There's no question about it.
It's funny because almost any other team owner or executive that you could think of in any sport in a situation like that would say, no, don't really want to talk about it now. We'll have an announcement later. But you knew Jerry wouldn't be able to resist. He was so excited about getting the deal done that since you were there, he always loves talking to you. Had I been there, I'm not sure it would have worked out.
No, it would have.
He stopped and talked with you and the other reporters on hand. And it's a deal that had to get done. I mean, I was at the oil change place today, and one of the guys says, "So, Ducey, you think Dak's worth all this money?" And I said what I always say. I said, if somebody thinks you're worth it, then you're worth it. If somebody's willing to pay it to you, You're worth it. It's the way of the world in the NFL right now, and he's been successful enough, Dak has, to where I'm not batting an eye at this. It's just the way it goes. Good for him.
And he's resetting the quarterback market. So all these other QBs like a Patrick Mahomes, who Dak is getting paid more annually than Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, well.
It is what it is, though. This is the way of the world. And CeeDee Lamb's deal got done after the game. He said he's glad that this can just be put behind them in terms of his deal and Dak's, because let's face it, it has been a distraction. If we're talking about it every day and bringing it up to these players, it does become a distraction and one of the main storylines. And CD appeared on Kay Adams' podcast saying that they were in contact, he and Dak, all the time. And CD was like, I don't want to start over with a new quarterback. I want to be here with you and both of those guys. See how this season plays out now.
I thought it was interesting because we've talked about this. I'm not sure if we have on the air, but we've talked off the air about how we've kind of wondered how the relationship was between the three big superstars. You've always gotten the feeling that Parsons and Lamb are close, but I'm not sure about Dak with either of those guys. But CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons both went out of their way to be just overflowing in their praise of Dak after this thing got done. And I do think this speaks volumes. Prescott is not a perfect quarterback. I know that. By and large, he's been a bad postseason quarterback. Everybody knows that. He was terrible in the Green Bay game, but he's been a really good quarterback the vast majority of the time, just not the times that matters the most, But I think he's gotten so close that if you're Jerry, you're like, I've got to believe that he can break through. I'm not ready to do a reset on this. I'm 80 years old. And Jerry kind of half-jokingly said, I'd love it if Dak were my quarterback for the rest of my time.
Rest of my time.
Doesn't necessarily mean just referring to the contract here. In other words, hopefully Jerry's got another 15 years left or whatever. But so that got done. You were in Cleveland. I was at home getting ready to come in and do our show. And I was home alone. My wife was out of town. And I'm like, man, I'm hungry for some breakfast, I would really like to have some breakfast.
Oh, we're pivoting to okay.
Just for a second.
Oh, yeah. More than a second.
Digress?
People want to know. Yeah.
So anywho, and we'll talk more about the game itself in a minute. But, I tend to be, when I'm making breakfast for myself, like a cereal or toast guy. That's kind of the extent of it. Maybe some oatmeal.
What do you put on your toast?
Do some oatmeal. I usually butter and peanut butter.
Oh, that's
Why not
good.
really
That's a good.
lather it up and get the fat started for the day? But I thought, you know what? I'm going to scramble me up some eggs. And for the first time, I can't remember ever having done it before, I made myself eggs, in this case, scrambled eggs.
Okay, but to just clarify, it's not your first time it's your first time making eggs yourself.
Right.
Period. How old are you?
How old am I? I'm 65.
You're in your 65 years of living. This is the first time you cracked an old egg, probably from a farm in Iowa, since that has the most production of eggs. And how were they?
I mean, I've peeled shell off a hard-boiled egg. I love those. But I did pretty well, I must say.
How did you make them?
I sprayed the frying pan with the cooking oil or whatever.
Medium high heat? What was the temperature?
I put it up full blast just to get it going.
To high?
I did.
Oh.
I mixed 3 eggs in a bowl with a little bit of milk.
Okay, that's
put salt
technique.
and pepper in there.
Okay.
Whisked it with one of those whisker deals.
Any butter in the pan?
Didn't put any butter in the pan, just Pam cooking oil, I think it's called.
Trick.
And put the liquid on
spray.
there. And kept moving it around,
I was gonna
right?
say, did you
Had to,
continuously take
because you're in trouble if you don't do that, right?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you want your eggs. If you're making an omelet, then you might let it sit.
Okay, but I had a spatula and just kept rotating it, and I must admit it tasted good. So anyway, that was my little story there. What'd you think of the game itself?
The Cleveland game?
Right.
I think they surprised a lot of people. I do. I said this on Free for All to you. I think more people picked against them than picked them to win.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And with all the talk about the lack of free agency moves, the roster not being as strong as in terms of week 1 performances. And again, I know it's only one game, but I think by and large they played a good brand of football. I know Dak only had 1 touchdown pass. Yes, the offense needs to put more touchdowns on the board, but in part, they really didn't need to. In human nature, maybe they took their foot off the gas a little bit in the second half because the defense was so dominant and they were all over Deshaun Watson. So in terms of Mike Zimmer and this defense, all the playmakers that they have, Micah's going to Micah, 11 quarterback pressures. He had a sack. D-Law, 2 sacks. Eric Kendricks, 2 sacks. DeMarvion Overshone, who was a non-factor last year because he tore his ACL. Everyone's just talking about his speed.
So fast.
So I was encouraged by it. I was.
I think that defense, if you can get 6 quarterback sacks and a couple of turnovers, you're going to take that in any game. And Watson looked terrible, and that might be as much about Watson as it is that defense. But I don't want to take anything away from the D. So much has been made of Zimmer's connection now with Micah Parsons. That could be really special this year. Kendrick's kind of a steadying force on that defense. And when you've got Diggs coming up with a pick in his first game back after so long, too, what a confidence booster that is. I don't worry about the offense in general coming off of that performance because, Aubrey did kick 4 field goals, so they were in position to score.
He was fun to watch.
A lot, yeah. And he could have tried a 71-yarder, almost did, wish he would have.
Should have had that 66
kicked a record-tying 66-yarder, but it was taken away because of the penalty against the Cowboys. So could you imagine if Dak had come out and laid an egg in that first game after agreeing to the new deal?
You would have seen banners. Is he really worth it? Is he worth it? But,
he was fine. In some ways, it was a perfect type of performance for Dak because he was good enough where you could see some spark in this offense, connected with CD a couple of times, read the blitz well for that wide open pass to Cooks. But as Dak said, he was disappointed in his own performance. And usually that means he's going to be a lot better in week 2. I will say the fly in the ointment is still that running game. And, Zeke looked, pretty energetic,
he's
right?
He's another one.
40 yards, okay.
But even people had already written him off, Mike, even before this week. Pretty much the narrative with him is he's washed, he can't do anything. Well, if he can convert in the red zone, I think that's a pretty productive thing for him. And he did look fresh. That first handoff he had, he was leaping over.
Right.
You know what I mean? So again, I know it's only one game, but there still is some juice left there, and they're going to utilize him as such. And that's why it's running back by committee, so he doesn't get completely worn out by the middle of the season. But it's fair to say that it's still a concern.
And as I've said many times, I'm kind of interested to see what Dalvin Cook can do if it comes to that too, because he's a lot like Zeke in that he's considered washed up by a lot of people, but he's not that far removed, just one season removed from having a 1,000-yard year. The Jake Ferguson injury obviously is a concern. He was Dak's second leading receiver last year, and the tight end didn't practice on Wednesday or Thursday. And as we record this late Thursday, I'd say the odds are against him playing, but they really got lucky in that it wasn't a serious injury. Because, man, when he went down awkwardly and the way it twisted, you thought,
bad.
oh, it's going to be MRI, it's going to be ACL, but it wasn't that.
Yeah, and he was saying that, very grateful that the injury wasn't worse, because freak accidents, freak injuries happen all the time, week to week in the NFL. So the Cowboys got lucky with that because he is a big part to this offense as well. And I said this before the season started that I'm interested to see the maturation in his game and how he tries to take it up a notch too. But the Cowboys have been so good at home. What is it, a 16-game home win streak in the regular
2 off the record,
yeah. So they've shown historically that they're really, really good at home. I don't think this Sunday is going to be any different.
So the Saints scored 47 points against Carolina, albeit in their opener. Derek Carr can be a dangerous quarterback. I mean, you look at his numbers compared to the other active quarterbacks in the league right now in terms of, touchdown passes, yardage. I think he's first. Is it possible he couldn't be first in completions? Aaron Rodgers has to be. I thought I read he was first in completions over the last how many years. It's kind of stuff I should probably look at more closely before we do this. But between Carr and Kamara, the running back, as a runner and a receiver, it's a little better test for this defense, I think.
Yeah, so Derek Carr, he completed 82% of his passes
in that first game.
In that first
really
game, their new OC, Clint Kubiak, who spent last season with San Francisco as the passing coordinator, QB's coach. So yeah, it'll be a little bit more difficult. I still think the defense is going to be ready and be locked in. Again, I just think the tone that they set last week, I think they have a lot of guys who are disruptors on this defense, and I think they'll be ready for Carr. I think they'll be ready for Alvin as well. To me, I'm going to be looking at the offense, I think, more closely this Sunday. And, let's see how many points they put up. Let's see how many touchdowns they get on the scoreboard on Sunday.
And I think a couple of drives that resulted in field goals last week will result in touchdowns this week. I think we both have Dallas winning by about 10. I think I had 31-20. Do you have 34-24?
34-24.
So I'd be surprised if it's not that type of game at AT&T Stadium. Let me ask you something on the fly here. Do you think this would work? And Adam, our podcast producer, will ultimately decide this. But we talked with Dirk.
Yes.
This past week about his big tennis event coming up Saturday. So chances are when you listen to this, it may have already happened. But it was for Dirk's foundation. That guy is always amazing to talk to, isn't he? I mean, such a joyful guy. He's the most humble, accessible superstar I think that I've ever known. And there have been some great guys who you'd call superstars in this market in my 30 years here. But there's just something about the way Dirk interacts with people that's really special.
He makes you feel special. Yeah. He really does. When you're talking to him, he makes you feel like you're the only person around. And I think that's
kind of like Sam Gannon in that way.
I try to make people feel special. It's a Cancer thing. Look it up. If you're not into zodiacs, I'm sorry, but go look it up. Yeah, I remember the first time that I met him and the first time that he came into this studio and how neat that was. And I'm just as excited to talk to him every time we have the opportunity. He does so much great work with his foundation and what he does to give back. And I think that's so important because he continues to be in the public eye as much as he can, but he does it for a good cause and for good reason.
We talked to him about Klay Thompson. He's obviously excited about having Thompson on the Mavs. We also talked to him about the challenge in returning a year after losing in the finals. So let's hear what Dirk had to say about that.
Well, I think, you stay hungry. I think it's normal to be disappointed for a few weeks, maybe even a few months, but at some point you got to put this in the rearview mirror and focus on a new year and get better as a franchise, get better as a team. And I think that's what we've done. That's what the management has done for this team. And so if I were Luka or Kyrie, I'd be excited. I can't wait for the new season to start. I would be eager to get that sour taste out of my mouth and just get it going. And I got to say, when we lost in 2006, yeah, I was frustrated, but I knew I'm just getting in my prime. I'm going to get there plenty more times, which I didn't know at the time. We wouldn't make it back till 2011, which I didn't think it would take that long. But I was more excited for what's in store for that team. And I felt like I was on top of my game. And I'm sure that's how Luka and Kyrie look at this, that they're still playing their best ball. And the guys around them got even better. So they should look forward to a fun season and hopefully a long run.
Like you said, Dirk, you've experienced, not winning a championship personally. Like for Luka, who just went through this, does that make you more motivated as a player to just get back and kind of take your game to that next tier? And where do you think he can elevate?
Well, I mean, it's tough. This kid is an unbelievable all-around player. How he already at that age reads the game. Usually you would say a guy like this in that age, having the ball a lot, he needs to learn how to read the game more, and you get that with experience. But I mean, the way he was reading the game already at that age is incredible. How he passes the ball, how he runs the offense. I mean, it's incredible at that age, and so he's way ahead of his time, I would say. I mean, one thing that's always people talk about is obviously defending, rebounding, helping out on both sides, maybe talking to the refs less. I mean, some of that stuff is obviously all up to him. And, maybe on the offensive end, sometimes trusting the pass, passing ahead, letting guys make the plays. Obviously, with Kyrie running on one wing and Clay running on the other wing, I think he's got plenty of options. So I think those are some of the things he'll work on for next season. But yeah, I mean, a finals loss can only push you, can motivate you, can inspire you to work harder, to be a better player, be a better teammate, and eventually, obviously, his dream is to get the job done, obviously, and then bring a championship here. And so a loss like this on the biggest stage can be good, though. Can be good to learn from and learn your lesson and see what you guys, what individually need to improve on, and also the team as well.
So Dirk basically saying, in his case, it gave him more motivation, but he admitted, it was another 5 years between the first finals trip and the second one. So for Luka, it's going to take a little bit of patience possibly too.
It doesn't. At the end of this past season, there was a lot of criticism that came his way from different media pundits. Talking to the refs, he looked gassed at the end of the year, which in his defense, he was dealing with injuries. I know people like to downplay all that he was dealing with, but he was carrying this team a lot on his back. And when you think about how Kyrie performed in the finals, by and large, he was not great.
Right.
So I think there's certain things. Luka is still a young guy, and I think he will be more motivated than ever heading into this season. He's getting some more rest than he normally has in the past. He did play with the Slovenia national team, but they didn't reach the Olympics, obviously.
Right,
so he
right.
got a little bit more rest in that regard, and I think that will serve him well. We're about a month out from the preseason for that, or not a little bit, or
Exhibition
training
games, training
camp,
and pretty much the exhibitions
Yeah.
right after that.
So that's coming up very soon.
It'll be interesting to me to see if the Mavs have the kind of year that the Rangers are having now, after coming off just such a high, if they can sustain that. And I think the acquisition of Thompson is a great safeguard against that happening. Just to have a guy with that experience, with still that skill level too, assuming he can stay healthy. That's going to be a lot of fun. So we close both thinking the Cowboys are going to be 2-0 the next time we talk, right?
I think so. And we do have that game on Fox 4 if you are in the Dallas area. We also have a post-game show as well.
Sam and Jeff will be live at the stadium. The old man will be in the studio holding down the fort, and we'll chat about the game, have McCarthy on live, probably Jerry on live after the game too. So 12 noon kickoff on Fox, and then the post-game after here on Fox 4. All right, every night you can catch us on Free for All on TV at 10:30, and we'll continue to ramp things up on the podcast because Sam won't have it any other way.
See ya.
Bye.